Mrs. Haas and Mrs. Fritz. I miss you and hope that all is well in quarantine. Throughout my year in AP Research, I focused on perfectionism and stress in high school students. I decided to focus on perfectionism after making a list of things I wanted to learn more about. After one Google search on perfectionism and the realization that I was in no doubt a perfectionist, I was hooked. I had so much fun researching this topic throughout the year, and I hope you guys enjoy my presentation. Before I explain more about why I chose this topic, I'm going to define what perfectionism really is. Perfectionism is defined by an individual's compulsive need to undergo overly critical self-evaluation and adhere to high personal standards. Some characteristics of a perfectionist are fearing failure, setting unattainable goals, and using accomplishments to determine self-worth. After conducting some preliminary research, I discovered that perfectionism has already shown strong correlations with eating disorders, clinical anxiety, and major depressive disorder. However, I could not find much information on whether or not perfectionism showed a strong correlation with stress. Stress, which is different from clinical anxiety, results from facing external pressures and adverse stimuli. Unlike clinical anxiety, everyone experiences stress. In the Western world, stress has increased significantly over the past decade due to an increase in social media usage and the facilitation of a pressure culture in high schools throughout the nation. According to the American Academy of Pediatrics, teens are at a higher risk of stress or mental harm as they navigate social media because of their limited capacity for self-regulation. Social media is contributing to unnecessary stress by setting unreasonable expectations, further facilitating said pressure culture in high schools. According to Tessa Newman, a student at Naperville North High School, a pressure culture is a culture that defines one narrow route to success and shames all who can't or don't want to follow as failures. Pressure cultures commonly place excessive focus on the future, contributing to unreasonable amounts of stress that can cause students to set unrealistic expectations for themselves. While Miss Newman is not an expert, her insight to the environment created in high-achieving high schools is invaluable, truly showing how expectations have only increased over the past few years. After considering all of this, I determined that the gap in my research was the age group of the research participants and the era in which the research was taking place. All of the studies I found on perfectionism and its various correlates included research participants over the age of 18. In addition, there have been no major studies conducted since the large-scale usage of social media and development of pressure cultures throughout the nation. Therefore, I developed the research question, which of the three types of perfectionism, as defined by the multidimensional perfectionism scale, correlate most strongly to increased stress levels in students at high-achieving high schools? The multidimensional perfectionism scale is the standard scale in the field of psychology for measuring perfectionism and is prioritized by the American Psychology Association. The three types of perfectionism defined by this scale are self-oriented, other-oriented, and socially prescribed. To explore my question, I decided to use survey research. My survey consisted of the multidimensional perfectionism scale, the American Psychology Association survey on stress in America, and a few Likert scale questions pertaining to the participants' activities and perceptions of their own behaviors. Survey research was the best method for my question because it easily allows for a possible correlation to be made between perfectionism and stress and was feasible given my resources. One limitation I encountered while conducting my research was that my sample was representative of a small population. Due to limited time and resources, I was only able to survey students from a single high school in the Chicagoland area. This means my results can only be truly generalized to students attending this high school, rather than students in the Chicagoland area or high school students across the nation. After conducting my survey, I found the correlation between each type of perfectionism and stress by calculating the correlation coefficient between the two. Self-oriented perfectionism, which results from an internal pressure to be perfect, had a correlation coefficient of 0.06, indicating basically no relationship with stress levels in high school students. This can be seen by the near horizontal trend line on the graph. Other-oriented perfectionism, which results when one has high expectations of perfection for those around them, had a correlation coefficient of negative 0.07. This again indicates basically no relationship with stress, which can also be seen by the near horizontal trend line. However, socially prescribed perfectionism, which results from a societal pressure to be perfect, differed from the others. It has a correlation coefficient of 0.5, indicating that it has a moderately positive correlation with stress levels. As seen by the positively sloping linear trend line, this indicates that increased levels of socially prescribed perfectionism are correlated with increased stress levels in high school students. When you think about it, this actually makes a lot of sense. In this era, high school students are constantly pressured to meet expectations depicted by social media. In addition, pressure about college is placed on high school students as early as freshman year now. These outside pressures are often indicative of higher stress levels, explaining why socially prescribed perfectionism would have a higher correlation with stress levels than the other two types of perfectionism. These discoveries have the possibility to have a large impact on students, parents, and educators across the nation. First of all, by understanding what factors are commonly indicative of high stress levels, students can work to reduce their stress or develop effective coping mechanisms when facing it. In addition, if parents and educators are aware of the pressure their students face daily, such as the pressure to succeed in preparation for college, they can work to mitigate the feelings of overwhelmingness and stress their students encounter. Furthermore, mental health disorders in the youth population are more common now than ever. If the said stakeholders become aware that the behaviors of socially prescribed perfectionism are commonly associated with increased stress, they can work to reduce these behaviors before stress develops into chronic anxiety. If I was given more time to conduct my research, there are a few things I would like to do. First, I would seek out survey participants from high schools across the Chicagoland area so my results could be further generalized beyond one single high school. Furthermore, after seeing that socially prescribed perfectionism was the only type of perfectionism that positively correlated to increased stress levels, I would have added questions pertaining to some of the correlates of socially prescribed perfectionism, like social media, appearance, and academic competitiveness. Ultimately, my research shows that socially prescribed perfectionism correlates most strongly to increased stress levels in students at the surveyed high school. This means that students that exhibit the characteristics of socially prescribed perfectionism are more likely to have increased stress levels. Considering that societal pressures are only increasing, which contributes to the behaviors of socially prescribed perfectionism, it is important to not only consider the research thus presented, but more importantly, continue to research this topic before the Western world is faced with an epidemic of perfectionists. Thank you for watching my presentation.